Good afternoon, everyone. I am Mekhelia Aphrodite, and this is Athena Alaya, and we have a very interesting conversation that we're going to have today about that age-old subject that everybody seems to want to master, and that's manifesting. But we're going to be kind of talking about it from a whole different angle. So let's get started.
Yay.
So this is a very interesting subject, and I have recently made some sort of epiphanies that have created this sort of like paradigm shift inside of me. And, I wanted to talk about it. So, how do you feel about that?
Let's go.
Let's go. Okay. Well, so there's this interesting shift that just happened. It was like, well, when you practice like alchemy, and elevate your consciousness, things just start happening, right? And I don't know, I just woke up and it was like everything changed. And there was this new foundation that shifted in me that came from a state of being. And I guess that's the word I would use because it's more about like I'm not trying to manifest anymore. I'm not trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong. I'm not trying to figure out what's going on with the planets that I have to wait until Thursday to utilize Jupiter at 2:30. I and none of that. It's like suddenly something shifted and I'm just there. It's like I absolutely know that certain things are going to happen. I absolutely feel it, and I feel this energy inside of me that feels so, like, elevated to where it's almost like it's happening right now. And I think that's when I say being, I guess that's what I mean by that, this feeling that it's right now. And everything inside of me, and I've even noticed, like, my husband shifted his, like, mindset. He's all like, already, what country are we moving to? And, looking at all the possibilities that are fixing to happen from all of this shift that's about to happen. So it's like I wake up and I'm just super happy. Like you're waiting for Christmas. Like Christmas is coming. You're gonna open up those presents and you're super excited about all this stuff. Or you're about to move into this new house and you already purchased it. So you're really feeling that feeling of I just bought this house and I'm so excited. It's that, but it's like on everything. It's like I know everything's gonna work out. Anyway, it's this shift, and I wanted to talk about that. Like, I run into clients that or some of my followers and people that are trying to learn how to manifest, and that's the problem right there. It's the trying.
Yes, I would agree with that. Mainly because if you're trying, then if you just consider the specifics of that, right? Like, I'm going to try to get up this hill. Trying has with it an underlying insinuation that it may or may not happen, right? And that's always the big issue that people have with manifesting or changing or transforming is the kind of I would call it innocuous doubt that remains within the consciousness, right? And this is why when I have conversations with people, I like to reframe things. I like to utilize different words, right? Um, in order to help people to overcome the hump that gets associated with the kind of common language that we use, right? For example, with astrology, right? We refer to the planets, as planetary forces. Well, the idea of force is that there's something being exerted on another, right? And that's true to some extent. But that also then leads to this belief in a person's mind that the energies of the planets are forcing themselves upon you. They're impressing themselves upon you, right? And they definitely can be if you're in a state of consciousness where you're functioning from what's known in psychology as an external locus of control, where everything is happening to you from the outside, right? Rather than what's known as an internal locus of control, where everything that you're experiencing on the outside is a reflection of the inside. And that really speaks to what I call the master formula from the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, as above, so below. So what I like to do when having discussions about things like planetary energies is, reframe it for the person, with respect to, look, the planets aren't forcing themselves upon you. They're creating an ambiance around you, right? And just like when somebody walks into a room and all of a sudden the energy shifts because this person is very charismatic, they just have something about them that's so different. And all of a sudden everybody's paying attention, right? That person didn't force anything on you. They just walked into the room. What they did is they created an ambiance, right? That resulted in an impact. But that really depends on who you are as a person too, because there may also be people in the room where that person walks into the room and they don't notice anything at all, right? They're focused on something else. It has to do with where a person's focus of mental energy lies and their underlying belief system. So when it comes to things like manifesting, right? And people are like, I don't know how to do this. I keep trying to do this, but it's not working. The first thing I do is correct their language, because there's power in your words, right? Mm-hmm. When you speak it, it becomes more powerful, and those ideas get reinforced in your head. And what you're talking about here is a shift from making attempts to generate something from the universe, right? To moving into a space where you recognize it's already there, right? You went from essentially being on a boat on a river and driving that boat and trying to learn how to be a skilled driver, to being now like the fish, that's in the river already, that understands how the river moves. It understands where it needs to go. It's in touch with the fluid motion of the river and can even, swim upstream, right? There's like salmon, for example, when they migrate, they'll swim against the current. They're not worried about that current impressing itself upon them. They've got it. They know exactly what they're doing, right? They're living in that space 100%. And being able to derive and generate from the fundamental, current of the universe, whatever it is they want to bring out, right? That's why I don't call it manifesting. I call it revealing. It's already there. You're just unveiling it. You're just revealing something that's already there.
It's interesting you said that, because like as you're talking, I'm thinking, this isn't manifesting. This really, because I would say that I always felt like I was a really good manifester. But there was this belief construct that I would do A plus B plus C equals this, and this is the result. All of that's not important anymore. It's like that was the training wheels. And I don't really even see it as manifesting, because It's not like I'm trying to do some kinda thing to make something happen. I'm not creating a vision board, I'm not doing all this stuff to make something happen. What was the term you used? It was unveiling? Okay.
Unveiling or revealing.
Right, right. Okay. So, it's literally about, like, just kind of pulling away my fears, pulling away all my negative emotions, pulling away all the lack feelings of anything like that, and moving into I see it. Just like you have already purchased a house. You've seen the house. You've walked through the house. You've went to the bank and you paid for the house. And now you've got this inside of you, this feeling and this vision, and you're sitting in it, right? You're being it because you can't help it because it's already there, right? So it's like when you said peeling the veil, like just moving it or unveiling it, you're literally that. I think that's what exactly it is. It's like you're just because it already exists. Now, I think that that's important because people are not going to understand what that means. Like, what does it mean? It already exists. Go ahead. I know you're like ready to say something.
Oh, well, I was just going to make a comment about you and manifesting, because I remember when I first met you many years ago, we were having a conversation about this. And I remember you relaying this very powerful story to me about, you were looking for a new place to live and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And you just, there was, I don't remember the whole story, but I remember you saying, and then I saw it in my mind in every detail. I saw the color of the rugs. I saw the furniture. I saw, all this stuff. And then all of a sudden you came across this home for rent that was exactly within, the budget you wanted and the features you wanted and all this stuff. But the interesting part of that conversation is that you had been trying to manifest something and you were running into a wall, and that you moved it, your consciousness shifted at one point, and it just was revealed, in your to you, what this was, and you were so rock solid on it, and then all of a sudden, bam, it came to you, right? So at that point, you were, in my opinion, going through what I would call like a distillation phase, right? Which is a component of moving into a more permanent phase of consciousness, where you experience that state of consciousness and then you go back. Then you experience it again and you come back. This is very similar to what happens in meditation. When you meditate and you transcend and you go down into the state of pure consciousness and you come back. You do that over and over and over again. Eventually, you move into a state known as cosmic consciousness, where that state of pure consciousness is always with you. It's kind of like how your arm is always with you. Maybe you're not always paying attention to your arm, but your arm is always with you, and you can pay attention to it at any time without having to move, without having to go into a meditative state to get to that state of pure consciousness. It becomes permanently fixed. And that's what it sounds like has happened to you recently, is you've been, spending years refining your consciousness with respect to this idea and this understanding of what manifesting really is. And, working with different techniques and tools, and also doing just a lot of introspection until you finally, your consciousness ripened essentially. And now you're in that more permanent state of consciousness, which then also comes with a confidence, because it's not that you believe. I also don't like that word either.
Yeah, it's not believing.
Right.
You're right. It's not, it's
Believe.
being. It's being.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is though, is those are first steps, right? If you've never tried any of that kind of stuff before, right? Or you're trying to build your confidence, you're insecure, some people think it's kind of stupid to say affirmations and stuff, but what's the point of that? It's to remold your mind, right? If I believe I can achieve, I believe I can achieve, right? But there's a point where you recognize that the idea of believing also means there's a doubt still attached to it. That's what you're trying to move forward out of. So what we're talking about today is essentially, it's not that beginning phase, right, of trying to move your mind into a space where you can manifest and you can manifest, but moving from that space to where now you're living in the space, of creation essentially. It's not separate from you no longer, right? It's not like, I'll give you another example. People talk about things like spiritual practice, and their mundane life. I got my spiritual practice and then I have my mundane life. Oh, I got to go to my mundane job now and this and that. And I say to them, it's no different. What you do in your temple space, what you do on the yoga mat, what you do at church should be no different than the rest of your life. It's all the same. It's all spirit, right? And as long as people keep defining these separate boxes, that's, why they continue to stay in those spaces longer. Once you recognize there's no difference between your spiritual life and your mundane life, then it's much easier for your consciousness to transform into those permanent states where you're living in this state of being all the time.
So true. It's so true. I and everything you said, I completely agree with. It's it's difficult to get your head into believing. I mean, I remember when I was really just first learning manifesting, and this guy that was teaching it to me told me you have to believe it with every part of your soul, your being, everything. And I remember praying and asking God, like, how do I get to believing if I've never experienced this? So it's difficult to believe in something that you've never seen. Like,
That's where faith comes in.
I know,
That's
I
what the
know. It's
idea of
like,
faith is you've never experienced it enough to believe it can happen. So you have to have faith that it will happen, right? It's like when you start searching for jobs early on in your life, right? You have no concept of what it's like to do a job interview, etc. Right? How can you believe you're going to get that job when you've had no experience, no skills, right? So you have to have faith when
but
you go
how
on
do
and get
you
that
even
job.
yeah, but how do you even, like, have faith? I mean, all of that to me is it's like I remember that feeling of, you know, not knowing how to get to believe or not how knowing how to get to faith. Like, how do you have faith that this criminal that's in your house isn't going to steal from you? Like, how do you have faith that if you don't lock the door that somebody won't break in?
Well, faith is a constructed belief, right? Here, this was a great time to kind of maybe discuss like some phases, right?
Mhm.
Faith is constructing an artificial belief in yourself that something is real or something is going to happen or you're not going to be harmed or whatnot, right? Belief is a phase where you're moving away from faith because you have enough experience and confidence with the process of something that you can believe that it's definitely going to happen. Like I believe I'm going to get this job because I've interviewed for 10 jobs in my life and I've gotten every single one of them. So what's going to be the difference here? Faith doesn't need to be involved at that point, right? You have experience and confidence. You can believe that you're definitely going to get that job and walk into that interview with that, right? But there's still a little part of you that, says, well, it might not be possible, right?
Mhm.
That's why there is
Yeah.
still a belief.
Right.
But, as you continue on in your career, right? And now you're an established subject matter expert. Nobody can do what you do. You have a very specific skill set, and now right? You know you're going to nail every job opportunity that comes along to you, because they want you. They're competing for you now, right? You're not competing with other people. Now companies are competing for you and your subject matter expertise, right? That's now when you're living in it, right? That's now when you're in that state of being, of knowing, right?
Right.
So you can see how, there's a process that kind of goes along with the transformation of our consciousness. And at each phase, right, we have to apply different techniques, belief systems, etc. But essentially, we're living in a box, and then we get to a point where we recognize we've learned everything that's inside that box. We got to break free from that box and move into the next one.
Yeah.
It's bigger, it's more flexible. And then the same thing happens, and we move into a bigger box, right? But eventually, over time, those boxes are no longer required for us.
Right. Exactly. And sometimes these things are just training wheels to get you where you need to be. Because the ultimate goal, and I've heard this so many times, and why did it not ever make the connection with me? You live as if. You act as if. And I remember thinking in the back of my mind, how do I act like a millionaire if I don't have the money to spend like they do? you know, like I remember thinking that. And I think that that's where people get hung up, because I know I did. And it's not that. This is about shifting something inside of you, and you're acting as if it's coming tomorrow. You're feeling that feeling like it's coming tomorrow. Like you ordered the pizza and you know it's on the way. And that's the difference. It's about that internal feeling of being super excited, about what's going to happen, what's about to happen.
Well, there's another component, though, to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is that it's demonstrated, right? You've moved now into a space where you know something, but then it also is demonstrated time and time and time again. So it's proven to you that, you're not just living in la la land, because you can think anything you want. You can believe anything you want, right? You can believe you're a unicorn with wings, but if you go jump off your roof,
Hey, you see what happens, right? Right.
There's the demonstration of its truth, right? To prove that that's actually happening. Just like when, you're now the SME that people are competing for, right? You have that demonstrated evidence, that proof. And I always bring that up because, when talking about spiritual concepts, and then things are mixed, right? With ideas like faith and belief and this and that, right? And people are various, levels of consciousness. I'm always clear. You don't want to, if you're just like living in your own world and nothing is happening, maybe people would think you're crazy, right? You can do mental exercises to train yourself to get into that space, right? But don't fool yourself, essentially, by thinking you're a millionaire when you're not, and then going out and balling out with all your credit cards. And now you're in $100,000 worth of debt, right? Like you still have to use common sense.
I think that's where the misconception is. Because I was like, what?
Being a millionaire isn't about what you're putting on your credit card either. It's about a mental attitude. And I'll tell you what, all the women I know that's rich, they're stingy.
That's so funny. I want to kind of go back to something you said. Okay. So I'm going to kind of back up a little bit, because I think this is super important. So we established it's about being. Okay. We have established that there's a process. And sometimes through this process, you have to get to knowing, and the knowing, it comes from seeing it work. Okay. Which means you gotta like do certain things to get to that point, right? And I usually say, at that, try to manifest something that you're not attached to the outcome, to start there. That way you don't have negative feelings attached to it, like fear and worry and lack and all that other stuff. Um, but going back to what you said about the unveiling. Okay. I think that a lot of people probably may not understand what that means. So I want to kind of cover it very basically, and then maybe you can kind of throw a scientific twist on it. But the basic concept of understanding that when you live in an illusion or a matrix, what you're understanding here is that your life is going in the direction in which you think and believe. And the second that you shift that, the outcome shifts. And it kind of goes back to the particle experiment. And, because when you're focused on something, suddenly it was only like in that video, it was like one line. But when they took their focus off of it, all these different opportunities, as they said, all these different lines showed up. Okay. So it was when you focused on something that it narrowed down. So what are you focusing on is what ends up showing up in your life. If you're having a relationship problem with somebody, it's because your viewpoint and who they are hasn't changed. Maybe your actions have changed, but your viewpoint and who they are hasn't changed. And it's not until you tell yourself that this person is somebody different, and then you respond in that way. And this happens all the way across the board. It has to be, like when you say unveiling, for me it means like you're seeing something, you're seeing that there's there's a possibility that already exists right over here, and you're focusing on that. So that's what I understood you to say. And so I don't know. Is there more to it? Is there, when you
Yeah,
said unveiling?
I would say there's more to it.
Okay.
And I'll loop back in what you said too
Okay.
well, okay? And I'll give it a scientific twist for the
Good.
layman, okay?
Good. 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 I like science.
So let's if we just think about what science has discovered,
Hmm.
right? It's that at the basic fundamental field from which everything is created, right? It's vibration, right?
Hmm.
There's an underlying it's like I would, as an analogy, say think of it like a sea, right? A
Hmm.
sea of vibrations, okay? And then from there, you have the various layers that are discussed in, you know, uh, quantum physics and then classical physics, all the way up, right? So there's, from the vibrations, then we move into things like quarks and stuff. And then, eventually we're moving into things like atoms and then, compounds and then eventually cells and then organisms, it all exists on a hierarchy, right?
Hmm. Right.
But underneath all of that is this kind of sea of vibration from which everything kind of, it gets stimulated and then it manifests right into the physical world eventually. And I found it very fascinating when I was in college to study quantum physics, because this is exactly what spiritual gurus and yogis and masters of the ages had already determined was the truth through practices like meditation and other metaphysical practices, right? And so this, it was proven essentially by science that spiritual people weren't living in their own world all these thousands of years.
They weren't like wacko and crazy.
Right,
Woo
exactly. So
woo.
there's evidence on both sides, right? Scientifically and also through what I would call the science of consciousness, that, there's this fundamental, what I would call substratum, right? Um, and so if you think about that, right, that's the creative force of nature. And that's what when we're unveiling, right? What we're doing is we're unveiling a possibility. That substratum is like, it contains all of the possibilities ever that could exist. And we're unveiling certain ones over time. Now, to kind of loop back to what you were talking about, something called the double slit experiment, which
Mhm.
was kind of essentially the starting point of this field of quantum physics, right? Where they were shooting, energy at this screen, and depending on what the scientist, right, uh, thought would happen, would it show up as a wave or a particle? Because light energy has both the properties of being a particle and a wave.
Mhm.
But it would show up as a particle or a wave, right? The signatures of that, depending on what the observer thought was going to happen. And that just blew everybody's mind, right? The idea that what you're thinking, right, in your observation can impact the manner by which a light particle
Mhm.
will manifest its signature on this detector screen. Okay. So again, that shows right there, is scientifically founded, that we have the ability within our consciousness, right, to determine outcomes. So if we think, about the field of consciousness that underlies everything as being a big present, and you get to go pick out, something from it, that possibility exists, right? But the question really is, well, how do I do that? And how you do that fundamentally is by getting closer and closer to that underlying state of consciousness that permeates everything, from which everything was born, right? And that's what the yogis and gurus and masters and brahmins and everything over history proved, was that through particular spiritual techniques, one could not only know that was, experience that field, but become unified with that field, right? That's what it's called, unity consciousness,
Right.
right?
That's it. That's it. And, when the shift started happening with me is when I started working with Aphrodite. That's when, and then when I started embodying Aphrodite, uh, I think at the beginning it was channeling Aphrodite, and then it was embodying that spirit, and then it was like she's just with me all the time. She is me living in a world that's techno- more technology and all kinds of stuff that wasn't there before. So it obviously it's like a different experience, right? So there's Michelle, and then there's Aphrodite, and then together it just like causes shift inside of me.
Right.
And
Well, the archetypical energy of the goddess that you've been working with is it's at a different vibrational level, right? That's closer to that sea of consciousness, right? This is why magic works, you know, in all of its various forms and fashions, because what you're doing is you're utilizing a formula. You're leveraging a technique that helps you to utilize a formula that essentially harmonizes your vibration with the vibration of another energy, right? That
mhm,
makes something happen, right? You can use it for transformation. You can use it for creating something, manifesting something, for purifying your consciousness. There's all kinds of ways you can use these techniques, but the manner by which it works is by harmonizing your consciousness with an archetypical signature, right? That's expressed very close to that field of pure consciousness that underlies everything. And the more you do that, the more permanent that vibration becomes within you, right? So you begin to see things differently and take on different characteristics. It opens up ideas for you that you never considered before. It makes changes within you that you didn't maybe even know were possible, right? Look, think of it like this, right? When you're young and you meet someone that becomes your new bestie at the park, right? You and that person were different, but there was something similar that drew you together. And then as you started becoming closer and closer friends, what do you know? You're taking on each other's attributes, attitudes, speech patterns, thoughts, you know. You might just show up one day, like this happened with my friend Fawn a few weeks ago. We went to this concert. She's like, "Hey, look at this hoodie I got from this other, show." And I was like, "I got the same hoodie too." And she's like, "You have the exact same one." And I'm like, "Yeah, girl."
That's hilarious.
Stuff happens to us all the time, right? It's the same thing when you're working with these different archetypes, right? You start to resonate on that particular level of vibration.
So basically, hanging out with you, I get smarter. So I don't need to get a PhD. I just spend more time with you, and I get smarter.
Truth. No, actually, there is truth to that, and I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. I learned this when I was younger because I did not come from a white collar family. I came from a blue collar family. No one in my family had ever gone to college or university, right? And I learned when I started entering into academia that if I really wanted to be smarter and better and do things that I never thought I had the ability to do, because I was told when I was young, some people are born to be good at math and science and some aren't, with the insinuation that I just was not, right? And I realized later when I came into, a different collective of people that that's not true at all. Most of these things are skills, right? Unless you're truly born, with things that inhibit you mentally, like truthfully, right? You don't have the capacity. It's really just developing skills. And I learned that a critical component of developing the skill of an intellect, and a lot of people don't know this, you can actually truly raise your IQ. Science has shown, people used to believe you can't change your IQ. It's fundamental. That's not true. You can raise your IQ. The best way to do that is to be around people as much as possible that have that skill that you want, right? Whether it's intelligence or motivation, confidence, whatever, just being around them. You don't even have to try to do things to be around them, right? Just being in their space, just listening to them, watching them, observing them, and if you can formulate a relationship with them, learning how to understand how they think, what they do, what kind of resources they use. Yes, that impacts you over time and helps you to transform. So just like you feel when you hang out with me that you become smarter in certain areas and topics, right? My presence isn't changing, who you are as a person. You're intelligent already. You're just learning more from me about things that you didn't. And it's the same for me with you, right? I learn a lot from you about working within certain realms that I didn't emphasize, my own personal path, for a long time. And considering things in a different way that have benefited me, right? We learn from each other, and that's allowing us not only to resonate on a similar frequency together, but also to then increase our frequency together.
I agree with that. So we're both getting smarter.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I'll say that to you, our wonderful audience. You have the same
Yeah,
impact.
yeah.
I love when you chat with me on Facebook about stuff. I just love to hear your thoughts. I realized one day, um, we need to take, I don't want to say advantage of people like in a bad way, right? But we need to take advantage of the opportunity that we all have together here, right? On social media. You can spend your time learning from one person, or from books or whatnot. But why not combine that with the collective knowledge and understanding that people have? I decided at some point, just to start asking some questions for things I'd like maybe some help and feedback on. And the stuff I get, on my Facebook page blows me away. I'm like, yes,
I
yes.
know. I always do that too. If I have, am like, should I do this or help me out? Sometimes I'll just put help. I need some help figuring this out. Like I didn't know how to do some kind of software thing. I put in a thing in there, and everybody is just so willing to step up and tell you something.
Bring it
Help you out.
together. We rise together. That's
Yeah,
what we
yeah.
accelerate our greatness together.
So, this conversation has really been interesting. Um, the whole goal here is to feel and think as if. Don't go max out your credit cards. and I think that was the transition for me, was to really getting into that goddess space. And when you get into the goddess space, you just start like, I can now see something that I didn't see before. Like you said, the unveiling, right? And and every one of us has the ability to tap into that space, that you can peel back the matrix, so you can see what's the potential in front of you. And anything that you can desire can happen. So, on that note, do you have any last comments that you want to make?
Yeah. I want to make it a goal to try to just be as clear as possible about stuff for how people can apply this in their life, right? Um, Michelle was explaining this experience where she was kind of living in one paradigm and then all of a sudden it just shifted and it was another. So what does that do? That gives people the impression that this change can happen overnight, right?
Mhm.
There's truth to that. In fact, what I found with people who are elevating spiritually, shifts will happen like that overnight. But it's not just because they're cruising around the world and all of a sudden, bing. No, it's because they've been putting work into it, right?
Mhm.
And once the consciousness becomes ripe, then the shift comes like that, right? I think there's like a Buddhist story about, a monk, he's sweeping and carrying water and stuff, and all of a sudden a rock just hits the ground, boom, he's enlightened, right? His consciousness was ripened and ready for, being in that next phase, right? So, if this interests you and you want to see those changes in consciousness, right? Where you're elevating over time and you're having those unveiling processes happen for you, you have to put some work into it, right? Through studying different techniques, being around other people that you emulate, that are achieving this kind of work, reading books from people, who were in those higher states of consciousness, essentially immersing yourself, right, in that kind of uh, spiritual cultivation process, right, which in and of itself mirrors exactly what you're talking about here, right? You're living in the space. Now you're living, constantly in that space. But what did you do to get there? You immersed yourself in a
Mhm.
similar space actively in your life. And then eventually you achieved it, right? So, there's definitely, there's a saying invoke and invoke often, right? What does that mean? It means do something every day, right? People complain a lot about, well, I'm busy. I don't have time to sit and have a meditation practice or a yoga practice or go to an hour ritual work or go to church on Sunday and, this and that, right? And all I have to say is this is scientifically founded that if you do an activity 5 minutes a day for 365 days a year, right, then you will have progressed much further than a person who puts in the same amount of time in minutes, but only once a week, right?
Mhm.
So
That's true.
do a little bit every single day. And if for some reason, you can't even just do a little bit every day, a week, once a week is all you can do that, right? That's better than doing it once a month or once every other month, right? And you'll
True.
find that as you make a practice a habit, seemingly more space keeps opening up for it. So
Yeah.
just
Well,
that
especially
do as
especially
much
if
as
you
you
believe.
can as often as you can.
Yeah, well, that's especially if you believe,
That's
right?
right.
That
Believe
space
it.
will just open up if
That's
you
it.
believe that it will. I don't know what happens, but sometimes time just starts slowing down when I need it to, or it speeds up when I need it to. It's like you start becoming a master of your own reality. And that's the bottom line, is getting to that place. So I want to comment one more thing and then we'll cut this off. Like, I liked what you said about all of this stuff, and it reminded me of the saying that when you fly like with the eagles, you become one. But if you crawl with the snakes, you become that. And it's like the idea here is really kind of relates to what you said. It's when you are around other people, more spiritual people, you shift. That I was actually thinking the other day, and I didn't realize it until I said it, but all of my friends are spiritual people, powerful women that are amazing, kind, like just really great people, like people that I just really love just because I like who they are. And those are the people that's in my life. And I just realized that the other day. I was like, I didn't realize that that much of a shift has happened. That either these people have changed or new people's come in my life. And when you change, everybody else changes because you are entering into a different paradigm, your different reality. And when you alter yourself and you alter your beliefs and you move that veiling out of the way and you go into a different reality, you're as long as you're staying in that same vibration, like you said, you're going to keep everybody around you is going to be different. And I have seen that time after time after time, even with my clients are like, dude, I am noticing my mom is different. And I'm like, yes, that shows that you're changing, when people start shifting around you. Anyway, I just want to close with that. And you guys have a wonderful day. I hope you enjoyed this. And we will see you next time where we're talking about this same thing about shifting realities in relationships. We'll see you soon.